About 15 years or so ago, I had a perfect storm in my life that basically was a kind of a reset across every part of my life, and so that was as challenging as it sounds, and it really caused me to start questioning, who am I? What am I here for? Like pretty much every question you can imagine came up and was pretty intimidating. And so, what's interesting about bringing our whole selves in is for me to bring my whole self in, it's gonna probably maybe sound a little weird, but I actually had to leave parts of myself behind, like the things that were not serving me or my future or showing up in the way that I wanted to, just in terms of personal leadership and what I wanted my life to look like. Um, for my best self and my whole self, as well as in the term of being like holistic, meant I first needed to leave some things behind, and that was somewhat counterintuitive, but probably makes sense looking back, and maybe should have been obvious, but it wasn't at the time. So
It never is. Those parts of you that you left behind, were those you, or were any of them parts that other people had offered or forced or suggested onto you that because it's happened so long ago, you didn't realize it wasn't actually you, and it's just they've always been there, and so they thought they were part of you?
yeah, that's actually a much deeper question than what it sounds like. As quickly as you said it, there's probably hours to unpack in that question alone. But I would say that self is not a static concrete thing, right? It's dynamic. It's partly the story we tell ourselves, partly our agreements in terms of what you're talking about, as well as the things that are put on us, the environments and the context we're in, whether or not that aligns and accelerates or stifles and holds us back. And so, yeah, self realizing who I was and how that maybe the interaction of those things, and understanding that I own the relationship in that became really critical for my own journey in terms of that, because I had to accept greater responsibility for my relationship with my context, the environment that I put myself, how I talk to myself, the stories that in the whole sense-making process of that I either served my best in my future or actually undermined that. And so I think, there's a lot of different aspects of that, but it's ultimately, I think if you boil it down to it, it comes down to both managing my agreements across those things and managing my relationship with those things, whether that's people or an environment or a context or even an industry. So,
And with yourself as well.
yes, 100%. Starting there, I would say.
Yeah. How did you, as you went through that process of deciding what to keep and what to leave behind, how did you know which to do with which?
Could you maybe restate that? I would love a little more context in what you're asking.
Yeah. I heard you say that as you went through this transformation, there were parts of you that you left behind so that the rest of you could move forward. How did you identify which parts to keep with you as you move forward, and which parts of you to let go of as you and leave behind?
Yeah, so there's a really good standard that I think that I use as a guideline for that. It goes, whatever is good, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is worthy, think about such things. And so I think for me, that's a good barometer of a lens of evaluation on those things. Ultimately, if it doesn't meet that criteria, then then perhaps it doesn't inspire the level of hope or goodness that is possible. So
I like those words. Those are positive, uplifting descriptions that I'm sure helped you through the transformation just on their own, that you knew you were focusing on those aspects versus focusing on the reverse of those to figure out which things to leave behind. You're focusing on the parts that help you move forward. And so the parts of you that aligned with that carried along, and the parts of you that didn't kind of disappeared on their own to some extent.
yeah, some certainly faded away on their own. I think quite a few of them took deliberate act of like forgiveness, and whether that's of other people or circumstances or expectations of myself, or disappointment in this world can kind of wreak havoc on us if we don't manage ourselves properly through that. And so for me, that was, I'm very type A, task oriented, love to get results. And so, I had a journey that didn't get the kind of results that I wanted. In fact, one of the conclusions that I had in that process that I needed to proactively move past and leave behind was there was a massive amount of work and effort and finances and time that went into a project that had a fantastic mission. I still, I could spend years of my life doing that mission now and feel good about it, right? So there's nothing wrong with those investments of myself and resources, but at the end of it, I had nothing but a negative of ashes to show for it. So some of my own expectations that I needed to move past in a real world sense is I'd have been better off had for a period of years that I had sat like laid in a hammock. This is what kind of haunted me, right? It'd have been better if I'd have laid in a hammock for a few years than had I done and expended and done all of the massive body of work that I had done in that process. And so it cost me, it cost my family. But is that a true statement? Is that a true conclusion? Like maybe on its face, but so much of these things that we have to put in a greater context of, well, okay, almost like interrogating our own thoughts and our own agreements in that sense of, well, is that really true? I mean, I had people tell me I got the equivalent of a master's or PhD in entrepreneurship and business through that process, even though, the results today weren't what they wanted. Ultimately, would that serve a greater purpose later? And it has, right? So this is just kind of where the messy middle where things haven't turned out the way we want. And sometimes in that middle, we have the inverse of what we're pursuing. There's sometimes you have to dig a deep foundation before you build something that has potential to go high. So, but the real human journey through that is, I can attest, at least in my case, is kind of chews you up and spits you out from time to time. So.